Welcome to Hiring Happy Humans, where we talk about all things HR with a variety of folks, from CEOs to community partners, sharing up-to-date trends, best practices, and our wild workplace stories. Each interview is designed to leave you with the knowledge to keep your sanity. I'm your host, Dawn Sipley of Sipley the Best. Thanks for joining in, and let's jump into this week's episode. Hello, welcome back, everybody, to the Hiring Happy Humans podcast. I am just so excited to have Connie Martin here with me today. Connie and I have known each other for a number of years, not only through the Central Florida Christian Chamber, but also through our local church. She has been just a wonderful blessing to a writing group that I am in while I am writing my very first book. Connie has already kind of blazed this trail with her amazing book, The Art of Picking Up Dog Poop. There she goes. She's got it right there. So
it's not working well with
amazing.
the background.
Yeah, it is. It is a leadership book. It's not all about poop, but it sure has some really good puns in it, which I am a fan of puns personally, if you can't tell from my little octo world that I've created around me. So welcome, Connie.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. I am just so excited to have you on today because as well as we know each other and our current circumstances, what I don't know about you is what led you up to this point. Like, where were you raised? What were your parents like? Tell me a little bit about your childhood so I get a better idea of like who formed this little Connie that I know today.
Well, that could take a while, Dawn. Let's be honest. So I'm a middle child.
Okay.
That's the art of picking up dog poop, leading from the middle.
Yes.
So I've been in this middle category for all of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a middle. I have an older brother, a younger sister. Okay. Parents were divorced more than once. So my dad was married 3 times.
Okay.
And I grew up with my father.
Not to each other, though. Not divorced from each other. I have seen some couples try again.
No,
right.
That would have been interesting, but that's not how that worked out.
Okay.
So yeah, first marriage, all 3 of us kids, and then second marriage through elementary school. I had another stepsister.
Okay.
Who was in between my sister and I. My sister and I are less than a year apart.
Oh wow.
So you had 3 girls, all the same age.
Oh.
Every summer. That was really fun. But I was still the oldest. And my sister was still the youngest. So that birth order stuff still matters. And then at the end of elementary school, they got divorced, and I was kind of that, what do you call it? Not quite a latchkey, but we had a lot of freedom, pretty independent, a lot of freedom. And then he got married again, when I was in middle school, 8th grade, and they stuck it out till my father passed away, probably 10, 12 years ago.
Wow.
More than that, 20 years ago. So yeah, I grew up with my father. And in the late 60s, early 70s, that wasn't a thing. You usually stayed with mom. Yeah. So we had all of those kind of different perspectives. My dad was Marine. And so I picked up 2 more stepbrothers in the 3rd marriage. Okay. And then I decided to go to a military junior college after high school. So when you ask, what did she do at 18? About a week after I turned 18, I went to basic camp in Kentucky. With a bunch of folks that were a couple years older than me. That was a lot of fun. And went to New Mexico Military Institute for 2 years.
How many females were in that school?
At the time,
I would guess it was male dominated.
Very much. We had 1 troop, and they called it Kilo Troop. Okay. All the women were in the same troop when I got there my freshman year of college. And then my sophomore year of college, I became the troop commander for that troop. I was a K troop commander. I did jump school. I was the only female that went to jump school. Wow. I was the K troop commander. And that year, the first semester, it was all women. And then the second semester, we integrated because we had so many more women, we integrated them across they call it the slab. So anybody who's been to New Mexico Military Institute will now affectionately know, yes, the slab. So I was a Kilo Troop commander way back in the 80s. Wow. So I was a second lieutenant at 19 and finished my degree at Florida State in computer science. Okay. And then I went on active duty within a couple of weeks of graduation.
Wow.
As a
Wow.
missile maintenance officer.
Interesting. Did you do any tours?
I was in Germany for a couple of years. Well, I spent 4 years in Germany, but in the midst of that, I found my husband, got out of the military, and then things changed. Yeah.
Things changed.
Yeah. Well, I made some choices. So you have to, I married an enlisted guy, which was not a popular choice. Yes. And all the things. So I have a lot. So I had a do-over. I had to start all over again in my mid-20s. Which would, because I had intended to do the career thing. And next thing you know, I'm married or newlywed, unemployed, and pregnant with a baby on the way. Oh, joy. But one of the funnest, and here is a new thing you don't know about me. One of the things I did do when I got out of the Army is I volunteered some with this. They have an organization called Family Member Employee Assistance Program.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Folks. And I helped out with them for 6-8 months while I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. I was in college instructor for a little bit. That was kind of fun. And then finally landed as a DoD contractor when we moved to Colorado. So I'm from Florida originally, went to Clearwater High School, went back to Florida State because I'm originally from Tallahassee. And then I did, after Germany, I spent 20 years in Colorado and then moved back here in 2012.
Okay.
So with Lockheed Martin. So I was with Lockheed Martin for 25 years.
Fantastic. So share with me some of the roles that you had at Lockheed Martin. How did your career trajectory kind of go with them after your years of service?
Yeah. So I started at CSC, Computer Sciences Corporation. I was with them for about 3 years and moved up very quickly. With them, they really wanted the leadership feature or leadership skills. And then they switched gears and said, well, she's great with leadership, but we really want to improve her technical skills. I'm like, all right, fine. I'll go be more technical. So I got us some additional work on this really cool business process reengineering kind of automation. Back in the day, they really didn't. Now you would call them a content management system that manages workflow and all that stuff. But at the time, we were tracking all the metadata for the entire satellite control network, the Air Force satellite control network. So I did satellite software for a few years as a tech lead. And then I was more of a development lead doing this other. And I have to be kind of cautious because I don't want to get in trouble with proprietary processes.
Yeah, of course.
But the business process automation and workflow and doing all that metadata tracking, I really got really good at system lifecycle migration. So taking legacy systems, moving them into something new. When I say legacy systems, I've been around a while. So we went from mainframe to Unix to Windows to web. We did all of that. So I've done a lot of system integration, a lot of data migration.
The data changes during that period of time were just absolutely enormous. The leap
grows.
Right.
Oh yeah. The systems, all of it. It's just awesome. So I did some time with satellite, mission unique software with satellites. And then I did a few proposals on large scale integrations. Ended up as a project lead for we called it a horizontal integration lab. Which was our newer prototyping stuff. In hopes of winning the Joint Strike Fighter. This was during those days. We did some live demos with the early Joint Strike Fighter, which is the F-35, which is kind of cool. That one had like 10-foot video screens with projectors in the ceiling. And you had to get all of it to work together. We had this posh conference room that looked out on the command floor. It was all very cool. Managed to get myself on PBS, a PBS TV show.
Oh, really?
Back in the day, way back then. Yeah, it was a long time ago. Who knew?
What did you do on PBS?
I was just there.
Education.
I had the headphones on. They're like, Bunker, don't start laughing. Yeah. No, we so right after 9/11, we Lockheed had sent a whole crew of people down to Eglin Air Force Base, may have been Hurlburt. They had this theater battle management core system,
okay,
TBMCS system, which ran the air operations centers.
Okay.
So I was in, I came in at the end of that, and we were doing a corporate video, and then they also did a TV show on it for, they called it Wings on PBS. It's really old. I mean, circa 2001. This is a long time ago. Yeah. So then I did air operations, weapon system integration. Again, specializing in some of those mission unique systems.
Right.
We integrated about 40
Right.
different, actually closer to 50 different mission unique systems, which is really cool. Things like weather and, you know, what do you do with all these different systems? How do you get them integrated and talking to each other?
Yeah.
And then I spent some time doing independent cost evaluation. That was kind of fun. A lot of international programs and seeing cost, technical, and schedule differences. Then I was on the Joint Strike Fighter program as a maintenance and prognostic health management, kind of both of those two products, and managing that through integration and upgrades. And then spent a little time on the presidential helicopter maintenance, virtual maintenance program. That was kind of fun. And then when I left Lockheed, I was still working with the National Cyber Range doing cybersecurity stuff.
Okay.
So it's very diverse. I mean,
yeah,
very variety. All of those times I spent some time doing system architecture, primarily the one they found that could get stuff done. And so I would get the complex, they're behind schedule. Let's go figure out how to get stuff done. So you could imagine we may have stepped in a little bit of dog poop here and there.
Yeah, especially when you're on the cutting edge of things, it can be kind of a landmine when you're in that leading position. And the only way to discover them is to step in it.
Well, yeah, what happens when the bag breaks? Everybody can imagine what those emotions are. And then I use some of those to kind of talk about how do we walk out of that.
Right.
Which is really
now,
cool.
Even with all the technical nature of what you were doing, there was people and colleagues all around you, all 25 years, personalities, and I'm sure egos, being in such a large corporation that's doing amazing things. I'm sure you wanted to quit more than once, just on the assumption of having been a headhunter for some time. What made you stick it out all 25 years? Because 25 years is quite a remarkable tenure with one organization.
Well, the beauty of a larger corporation, and the video froze on you, so I hope we're okay. There we go.
Oh, okay.
The beauty of a larger corporation is after 3 or 4 years, when you feel like you've mastered something, you can look and say, what else is there to go do? Or somebody comes and gets you and says, hey, I could use your skills on this. So if you got to work the proposal, the funnest one was probably the AOC, because I got to help do all the shaping on the proposal through that first lab. And it took a few years to win that one. So now you're kind of seen as an expert, and to be the one to help do the hiring and the startup tasks and get it up and running and moving, get deliveries out. That was really fun. That was a hard job. I almost quit many times.
What were the things that would bring you to that edge? Was it people that would bring you to that edge? Was it technology? Like what would give you those bad days?
Well, I was also in the midst of other bad days, personally. So some of that was the personal struggle. But I would say, you have those strong friends that will talk you off the ledge, if you will. So I can think of that team especially was probably one of the closer teams I had. There were probably the Joint Strike Fighter folks. We were pretty close there too. Those would be the most recent I would think of. So I mean, the people will always talk you off the ledge. They would come by and have a conversation, right? I always had a candy jar sitting on my desk. That could be a little much. I had one guy told me I scared him, and I just found that entertaining. very focused. See, you're struggling with that look, but back in the day, I could be pretty focused and direct and to the point. A lot of candor. So I would keep candy jars, a candy jar full of chocolate and Starburst, to soften that edge a little bit.
Okay.
And they would sit and have a conversation, and then you could figure out what was really going on, which always helped.
Having been a female, being not only raised in a male dominated environment and going off to college and having that youthful experience around older men, what advice would you give to young ladies that would be navigating that same type of terrain? Because it does add a unique dynamic to our careers when we're in those positions.
Well, I asked a VP that one time when I was frustrated because I was the only woman in the room most of the time. Me and one other lady were the only women in the room for most of my career. So it toughens you up a little bit. Early in my career, if somebody said I couldn't do something because I was female, that just
accepted.
Oh man, those are fighting words, I would say, right? So I've decided it's not really a glass ceiling. It's just this hard plastic. You hit your head on it and keep going.
Right.
So you just kind of have to dig deep and go find those peers or mentors that can help talk you off the ledge. And the tears are going to come on the tough days, and you go for a walk. Take a walk, pray a little, but take a walk and kind of calm your nerves, get a sense of perspective, and then come back to it. So it's not always.
I think that would be with any conflict, but is there anything specific that with dealing with men as a female, or even maybe the age gap, because those are two things that I've experienced, being the baby in the room and then being the only female in the room. Like, what's your best advice for how to navigate that as a young lady?
I would say keep a sense of humor. Okay. We tend to take things a little more seriously. I had an old warrant officer when I was 19, 20 years old, and he walked up and he just pinched my arm like that. And I hadn't even talked to the guy before. I'm like, okay. He's like, just seeing how thick your skin is there, Lieutenant. I'm like, well, all right. But that stuck, right? Because I realized at that point, I didn't know it all. He knew way more than I did. So let me learn from you. That whole knowledge is power thing, I really didn't have a lot of patience with that. But if you could sit down and have a conversation and get to know them and where they're coming from, there's often a lot to learn. There was a ton that could be learned.
And so just kind of approaching with curiosity and not a know-it-all attitude.
If you have that healthy respect for others that have been there longer than you have, maybe they haven't, but that's okay. There's something you can learn from everybody, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've kind of witnessed, and I experienced it myself, especially when I was younger. I tried real hard to be one of the boys, and to put myself in those circles and to have the bravado and to be the sarcastic, kind of edgy female, to try to be one of the guys. And as I grew, I kind of grew out of that. I realized that's just, it's not who I am. It's not who God made me to be, and to really kind of lean more into my feminine power and not to try to match their male, energy or whatever. And I felt much more respected once I stopped trying, because I think they could probably see it. And that might've been my youth kind of as well. Did you ever feel like you were trying to, be one of them, not in a gender kind of sense, but just trying to emulate that was maybe kind of against your natural way of being? Or
well, so the world has changed a little bit since I stepped out of the military and into corporate America, and I've seen that change. Early on, we were subcontractors to IBM. And if you think of Hidden Figures, where they all had to wear their pearls and we literally had to wear dresses to work, and you had to wear a skirt to work every day. It didn't matter if there was 10 inches of snow on the ground, you still had to figure out how to be in a skirt for work. I was so thrilled when they got rid of that policy.
Wow.
It was literally a policy up until till the internet kind of blew up in the mid 90s. They finally went to that business casual setup. Yeah.
Right.
You're going, no way. I'm like, way. So I don't know. Once you learn to just be yourself and be okay with who you are. I mean, there was a point where they were stalling a promotion because they didn't think I have to behave here. But because of too much energy in the room, right? You're the only woman in the room, but you say something. I mean, I literally lived that FedEx commercial where the one person says something and the other guy says the exact same thing, but he waved his hands.
Right.
And I'm like, I just said that. And like, yeah, but he waved his hands. I literally lived that commercial more than once in meetings. I'm like, what in the world? But once I kind of got a little the thicker skin, be okay with being myself. And I finally told somebody, I said, look, you're never going to turn me in to this quiet, docile mouse that never says anything. That's just not who I am. So stop. And when that happened,
they even thought they could try.
I'm like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Stop. I just gotta be me. So be okay with being yourself, but also be okay with taking some feedback and figuring out, play to your strengths and but be okay with who you are, because they see right through it anyway.
Right.
It's very animated. Forgive me.
No, I love it. Now, how did you go about deciding to retire? Were you like mulling it over? Did you just have a date and you were like, this is the date, and that date was set, or was it a challenge to decide that?
So I did some preparing because I wrote a book. And I remember sitting down and having a conversation with the publisher. I mean, honestly, for a long time, I'm like, I'm thinking about writing a book. I could write a book. Maybe I'll write a book. I got a good title. And then I started pushing a little further in my free time. I could write this book. I could do this. And then I finally said yes to let's get it published. And that was in the midst of a pandemic.
Right.
COVID hit. And Lockheed had been doing some things where I guess things just kind of worked their way out to that. But I got to the point where I hit 25 years. I saw an opportunity, and the book had been out about 6 months. And it dawned on me, if I don't take a chance now or take this opportunity, there was a lot of conflict of interest, and rightly so. They had a lot of conflict of interest policies.
Right.
And I didn't want to get fired, nor did I want to put my pension at risk. So here I sit, I could go a little early, take a little less pension. My 401k was healthy. I had this little opportunity that was fleeting. I could go now and take a chance on the book and start my own business and see what that encore entrepreneur kind of perspective looks like.
Love that.
Or I could keep doing what I'm doing, and who knows where we'll end up. Right. So I took the leap and said, let's go take a chance and see where we go.
How did the actual resignation process go? Like, did you do a written formal, or did you give a verbal and then followed up by the written? Like, what did that look like?
I wrote an email to my manager and said, here's my plan. Here's my date. I've projected it to be 30 days out. We sat on it for maybe a week or so before maybe 2 weeks before we told the customer, to give them some time. And then we started cross training and giving everything away. And it took a little bit to walk away. So I decided on Veterans Day as my last day.
There you go. Kind of fun. How appropriate.
And I had a pretty healthy vacation bucket sitting there too. So I had some really good, what's the word I'm looking for?
PTO to pay out?
Well, yeah, I had
Right.
some good buffers that had been intentional.
Okay.
Kind of saving those. I worked a lot. So what was really challenging was figuring out that change of pace and
Right.
realizing that I had not really taken more than a couple of weeks at a time in 20 or 30 years, more like
Wow.
30 years. So I had to get used to a change of pace and be okay with just chilling.
Yeah. Tell me
That
about
was
that
hard.
first day of not going to work.
Well, that was kind of okay. You just kind of felt like you were on vacation, like you were going
Right.
to take that 3 weeks of vacation. It didn't
Right.
really hit you until, because it was coming up towards the holidays, which you would
Right.
take some time off anyway for the holidays. So that made
Yeah.
that a little easier.
Yeah.
Um, but then that early January,
Right.
that
There's
was a little
nothing to
weird.
return to.
Yeah, that
What
was
were
a little
the
different.
what were the feelings around that? Was there any regret? Was it excitement? Was it surprise? Like there's so many different things that could go through your mind, I'm sure.
I would say I ran the gamut. There were days where I was like, this is awesome,
Right.
liking the change of pace.
Uh-huh.
Um, what was the best thing I think is that I now had the time, as somebody said, let's go for coffee. I
Yeah.
now had the time to go have that hour conversation, when in the past I'd always been um anxious, or knowing I had places to go, people to see, I got to go.
Right.
That's been the best thing over the last couple of years, is being able to say, I can be intentional and give you all the time that you
Right.
may or may not want. Yeah. But I have the time to sit and have that conversation. And that's probably been the best thing
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the relationships gained,
Yep.
I think is really fun
Yes.
as well. So for someone who hasn't read The Art of Picking Up Dog Poop, tell us a little bit about what it is, and tell us why this book was so deeply seated in you, because this wasn't a wake up and write a quick book and put it out there. You really labored over this
I
book.
did. I did.
Yeah.
I had 2 dogs. Their names were Dingo and Cody.
Oh, I had a dingo.
A
I did.
Dingo and Cody. And I read, I mean, clearly I read a lot of leadership books. I love to read. And most of the ones I found were either brand new leaders, or they were talking about getting to that corner suite and
Mm,
being the VP or the director. And I noticed that there were some challenges that were in the middle of the organization that nobody really talked about.
right.
What are those kinds of things?
Right.
And every time you shift or change jobs, there's stuff that nobody tells you. And I
Mm,
had picked up a few things, and then I found I could relate them to some of the water cooler stories that I was telling. And a lot of it was born out of a move from Colorado back to Florida with 2 dogs, recently divorced. Well, sort of recently divorced, but the kids at my nest, the empty nest was there. The kids
right.
were off to college. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, sell the house. Let's see what happens. Well, I learned a few things along the way. And so I decided to share them. And so I have this backdrop of the move and all
Uh-huh.
the shift and change and the things that happened as I was navigating all that change,
Right.
is kind of a backstory that takes you through the whole book.
Okay.
So Gators on the Pond, lead by example. So I found all these dog chapters, and then I found a leadership nugget that went with the different dog chapters. So what happens when the bag breaks? Now you stepped in it. I've got some really crazy stories in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
And
it.
then, navigating change. How do you pick up information from, if in corporate America, we do a lot of this. I'm going to take a new slot. We're going to pick the guy or gal who is replacing me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to cross train them for that 2 or 3 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even longer, while they're giving up their slot. They're
Right.
learning my job, and I'm
Right.
learning another job.
Right.
That
Right.
can get kind of complex. How do you do that? Well, I
Uh-huh.
was mentoring other younger leaders, and
Mm-hmm.
they're like, Connie, how do you do this? I'm like, well, and I found that I was giving that same advice over and over again. So maybe this is useful. So I put it
Right.
in a book in a way that everybody can understand it, not just the Lockheed folks.
Well, I love the leading from the middle idea, because very few lead from the front. there's only one or two, right?
Yeah.
That are at the apex. And then you can't really be leading from the back. And so most of what we're exposed to, right, is
Yeah.
that middle part, not only of life, but in organizations and whatnot. That very average and ordinary is so beautiful. And I think a lot of people have like this, we live in this world that's so comparative,
Yeah.
with social media, giving you the highlight reel of stuff. I love that you make something beautiful out of what's ordinary, and just accepting that there's going to be kind of challenges, and it's not the end of the world. We can go through tragedy and catastrophes and setbacks and really kind of come out of it more beautiful and forged, so that's kind of what I got from it.
Nice. Yeah. It's here's the thing. Everybody has to go through it.
Right.
You can't
Yeah,
get
there's
to the
no
top
avoiding it.
without walking through the middle. And there's some key experiences you have to pick up along the way. You're going to build that network. You're going to find those people that you're connecting together, right? I mean, I don't know everything, but I have now met all the people who know the things that you have a problem here. Let me go find so-and-so. They could probably help you on that.
Yeah.
Where it gets really cool is I guess what I really wanted to convey to everybody is there's a lot of action and activity and a very rich career in the middle of the organization. You don't have to reach the top to be a very fruitful and engaged and well-paid leader. And that's where all the action is. The further you get from the activities and the products and the deliveries, the less hands-on you have.
Yeah.
And now you're just kind of doing the strategic, forgive the term, bigwig conversations. And I enjoyed being with the real people who were getting things done and getting
the more tactical approach, hands-on. Yeah.
And I made some real choices to make that happen. I was kind of intentional. There were a couple of places where I had the opportunity to take that leap towards the executive offices. And I chose a different path. So,
yeah, I think a lot of folks constantly want like striving and success and forward and up is what's good and best. And that's not always the case. Sometimes being in the middle is exactly the best place for you to be.
Depending on where your strengths are, it could be. Like I say, everybody's got to go through it. You're not going to get to the top without going through the middle. And you really do have to kind of learn some of those, the people skills for sure, those soft skills. And that's really what the book focused on a little bit more, is some of those soft skills that nobody ever tells you about. Or they zing you for it. And you're like, well, how come I didn't know that before? Anticipating questions was a really fun one. And would really help you in the interview realm, right? I learned it as a really young leader in this thing called Frontline Leadership by Zinger Miller. It doesn't even exist anymore, right? They've sold it off. But one of the things they taught you was, and there's a real good book about that, The Question Behind the Question. I think it's QBQ is a good, I mean, it's a little older, but it's a really good book. So the value in that was you would anticipate, what question are they going to ask me? How am I going to answer? And then what is their response going to be? That's the extra step, right? I'm going to consider how I'm going to answer that particular question. And then what are they going to respond to me? And then now you've done a little more homework. And you're a little more prepared for how's that conversation going to go. And you're going to cover a few tentacles, as you will, from the octopus. We'll give a shout out there. But you're going to cover some of those other paths that you might not consider otherwise. And now you're a little more prepared for the conversations that are coming at you. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I don't think enough people prepare for conversations. Of course, for me, the first thing that comes to mind is interviews. It's always shocking that people can show up to an interview at an organization, at a facility, and be like, "Hi, I'm here for the interview." Okay, great. Who are you interviewing with today? Oh,
they didn't tell me, or
all right.
I don't know. Yeah,
I understand forgetting a name, that can happen to me too.
right.
What position?
Exactly.
I know your skill set. Back in a warehouse, like it's
yeah.
do you even know what's happening right now? So just that lack of foresight and preparedness for those kinds of conversations. But even when people come to me and they're wanting to make a hire, and they just think about the problems they want solved, but they never think deep enough to go, so what are the tasks that have to be performed to solve those problems? And they don't even, in their own organization, in their own company, under their own leadership, can't really give language to those kinds of things because they haven't. I don't know if we're just so distracted by stuff we don't get to sit and contemplate anymore, or we just expect other people to kind of lead the conversation and know what the answer to the question is already. I'm not sure.
So I don't know what gets them to that point, but I know in my experience, I got to be the interviewer more than I thought I might. Right. I was not always the hiring manager, but I had a strong say so and who got it. So I was the technical interviewer.
Right.
And I guess if I had a couple of notes, I would tell somebody, make sure you know what's actually on your resume. If you're the one being interviewed. But as the interview, it's not that hard. But looking at the personalities and what folks, to see if they're really going to be a fit in the organization, and more the pace of the work in your organization. That was what I looked at more than anything. What's their creative thinking? Can you adapt and overcome? Because this is never going to be the same project 2 days in a row. I mean, we're going to hit it hard and heavy. We're supporting a customer who also hits it hard and heavy. Or you have a reason. So you're really more interested in the personalities and their ability to keep showing up and the things that you really can't teach. Those are the things you're looking for during an interview. Can they fit in the organization? The technical stuff will catch up. I've had very technical guys. We've had a few where we hired very technical folks and they fit in for a bit, but the constant pace kind of took them out and they only lasted maybe 6-8 weeks. They're like, I can't do this. I'm like, I asked. So, one of my favorite questions at the end of an interview, and you can have it, it's not copyrighted, take it, use it however you want. I used to ask at the end of every interview, I'm like, is there anything that you expected me to ask that I didn't ask that you want to tell me about? It's the best open-ended question.
What are some of the interesting responses that you've been able to get from that?
Well, normally if they had one piece of experience that they thought that we would just hone in on and we didn't talk about, they would bring that up. Or if they had a special need or timing kind of thing, they would bring that up there too. Like, well, now that you ask it, I really could I shift my schedule? I kind of need to be out of the office on Wednesday mornings. You're like, all right, fine, we don't care. So those kind of things would come up. And it was a nice open-ended, if you were curious about anything and we hadn't covered it, that was the time to ask. And at that point, hopefully you'd established a little rapport and had some back and forth conversation, and they could see that you were open enough to see what they were thinking, right? I mean, we have work that's got to get done. We need somebody to show up and be hired.
And I also think it puts into perspective the scope of which they've given thought to the conversation beforehand. Exactly. Like, did they come to the conversation with the list of things that they needed to know that they know? There's very few things that a person can do in an interview with me that will be a knockout, meaning like, if you do this, there's nothing you can do to rebound where you won't be getting an invitation back. And for me, the knockout is when I ask if they have any questions. If they have nothing, I have nothing for them. If you can't come to the table with it, you're going to accept a job with me, spend 8 hours a day with me, and you can say yes right now and you don't have a single question. Like, to me, that's just the biggest red flag of being just so unengaged. So I love the way that you pose that question, though, because it also kind of shows their heart behind things. What did they do? They come up with a credential that might have maybe been missed, or an experience, or a project, or something more soft, or emotional, or a motivation behind wanting the job? Like, what is it that they want you to know? And that's such a kind question to really allow for a lot of grace and a lot of freedom to express yourself there at the end once that rapport has been built. So I might just steal that one.
Oh, it's all yours. It's really a favorite. It's a hard question in some ways, right?
It'll
take somebody back for a second. But it's a great open-ended question to, if you want to leave me with one thing, what would that be?
Right. Yeah.
And like you say, there's some grace that goes with that. I just found it to be a really creative way to get off the stage, if you will. Last question. And I would tell the hiring manager, here's my last question. That's how we know it's time to wrap things up. Wrap it up.
Exactly. Right? Exactly.
So, I mean, for those out there that are listening and are going through the interview process and are looking really hard and want something different, be okay with your skills, and then think of the things that set you apart a little bit. Be okay with being yourself. There's only one you. I've said it anytime you've seen me. I'm like, there's not another person in the whole wide world ever in eternity who has done or seen or been through the exact same things that you have. It makes you incredibly unique. And there's power behind that. So embrace it, accept it, and have fun with it. Right. I mean, there's dog. I got little paw prints going across my screen.
It's fun.
How fun is that?
Don't take life too serious. None of us are getting out of it alive.
A good sense of humor will do all kinds of wonders. It relieves stress. I mean, it's good for business, I would say.
When you've had to provide critical feedback or a disciplinary action, what is the reaction that you hope to see out of someone that you have a desire to succeed? How do they reply to critical feedback?
Well, as you can tell, I have a bit of an expressive face. So, I don't know that my poker, I'm not a big poker player because my poker face just isn't there. So I prefer to be one of those that would be more of a walk around leader, who would maybe have that side conversation a little more immediate. And I like to catch people doing things well and be the one that's your cheerleader. And if there was something to improve on, I would really like it to be more of, keep doing this because you do it so well. So the things that it might be a note to self, and let's talk about other ways you could have handled it, as opposed to, dude, you blew it. Because honestly, if they blew it, we probably both blew it. So in the immediate, they're probably going to know. Like I said, the poker face is not great. Unless I'm doing one of these, keep my mouth shut.
Right.
Let me think about it. So I really like to lead with the positive feedback. Or I might tell a story and see how if they can realize their own part in that story.
Yeah.
Which is probably why I used the books, the dog stories so well in the book, because I thought if I could tell a story, they may remember that, and the pieces of it, they may see themselves in the story and how they would walk that out. So I don't have the best. I mean, we had to give performance appraisals. We had to give something for everybody, right?
But when it was negative, what was your desire how would they receive it?
I would hope gently. Really. I mean, I would hope as I matured that I could be more gentle and kind. I mean, I'm just like anybody else. I came out of the military. I could slice somebody upside. I could slice them up pretty good. I had a pretty sharp tongue in the early days.
Same, girl.
And some of those words came back
my
to
tongue
haunt me
the best he could.
Yeah. So I have learned over time to watch my words and be a little more kind and gentle and try to listen first.
Okay.
Honestly, I've had friends though that come back later, years later, and like, I never saw you that way. I'm like, really? How fun is that? So I don't know. Focus is a thing, and people can take your focus differently than you intended it. So just, I would say, treat people the way you want to be treated, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And for the one that you're not okay, live and learn and keep moving forward. Life's too short to get stuck. Get stuck.
Right.
So
now,
I don't know if I answered your question.
Not exactly, but it's okay. You gave great information. So that's
I'm not sure. I don't have a silver bullet for that one. Every conversation is a little bit different. So it depends on where you're at. But those setbacks, you're going to take some feedback.
Right.
So take the feedback, process it.
I hope that they take it and they don't have a knee-jerk reaction, and that they can take it with some reflection, and then maybe a follow-up conversation if any clarity kind of needs to be made, especially in business. Something that I'm noticing that's evolving here lately is a new level of emotion that people seem to think is acceptable in the workplace. Crying at work, yelling at work for their righteous reasons, because they're passionate, right? These soldiers that are going for this cause, and rather than going through a diplomatic, professional, leader-like way, they're doing it in a very dramatic, emotionally manipulative kind of way. And I think, once they see that not work a few times, that they'll hopefully get some corrective action. But in the process of being accepting and everything, a lot of leaders that are more in my age group, they wavered from their principles and their values and allowed things to happen that they might not have allowed to in the past, just out of wanting to keep things kosher,
Right.
But sometimes that emotional response, I came from a place where if you start to cry, you need to excuse yourself.
That would be my reaction. I'm gonna, if you're getting tears from me, I'm really mad.
Right.
I'm angry. And I'm going to need a minute, and I'll be
back.
As
a leader, if someone was to cry in front of me, I would dismiss them. I would not want to sit there and witness that. I think it's a sign of respect. But now these people are like, no, I'm going to stay. And then they're in this like hysterical, and it's like, no, you're actually going to go.
No. Let me take a walk.
We are the thermostat, not the thermometer. We do not act this way at work. What you're doing is unprofessional. I understand your passion, but when you can come back like a child, like I do with my children, when you can come back and have a conversation about what's happening, then we can, but I'm not doing the temper tantrum,
Yeah. I didn't experience a whole lot of temper tantrums.
Not out of time. It's been recent. It's been the last 2-3 years this has been happening.
I mean, I've certainly been on the other side of upset, right? And let's take a break. Let me go gather myself, and we'll come back and have a calm conversation.
Right.
On the receiving end of that, if somebody is reacting, I'm probably going to try to stay as calm as I can.
Of course, yeah.
And that talk them off the ledge kind of perspective. And let's take a break and we'll come back. Right.
Yeah.
And we'll revisit this a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe at that point, I will have settled down and seen a different perspective. The yelling is rarely going to be tolerated, honestly. Now, if I'm just getting excited, I had to figure out what's my cubicle voice, right? I'm gonna dial it down.
I'm loud no matter what.
I'm loud.
I have to be
extra
sensitive.
And so there were times when somebody was like, "We can't hear Connie on the phone." I'm like, "Who has ever heard that?" Okay, perhaps my cube voice is working better than I thought.
Right.
Right. So I've found a way to chill, but did I too much chill? So that's the navigating. You kind of got to figure out what works for you and what doesn't.
Yeah. And watching how people perceive you, watching other people's body language or how they're, are they kind of, or, overwhelmed by your presence, or are they leaning in, so I think just watching
those cues
how other people react to you is an amazing, powerful skill set.
The nonverbal communication, I have read a couple of books on that one that I had to get a little smarter at. And that usually comes somewhere in the early 30s. If you can figure it out before then, awesome. Really, but that's some of the stuff you navigate, I would say, in your 30s. You get really savvy at understanding some of those social cues better. And I wasn't always great at it. I'm not sure I'm always great at it now, quite frankly. But the tears flow way less than they used to. So it's really that utter frustration. And normally if some of that's coming, burnout is very close.
Yeah.
It's not just one thing. It may be something that has nothing to do with you. Honestly, I would take the time. Let's go to lunch. Let's have some conversations, because honestly, there's probably something going on at home that you may need to know about that those are the few times I've been crazy triggered, that the stress is just unbearable.
Yeah.
And they are
on all sides.
Yeah. They're nitpicking at stuff or pulling on some threads I really don't want them pulling on at work. And I need to take a break and go get my act together.
Yeah.
Or I'm just having a really bad day and you guys need to leave me alone. I mean, and we need to be okay with people having a bad day and just leave them alone. Give them some space. It'll be okay. They'll come back tomorrow. It'll be okay. So I don't know that I gave any great words of wisdom there, but that's kind of what happens when the bag breaks kind of moments. Then now you've stepped in it, one day at a time.
Yeah. I found that trust can be gained in two ways, either time or through hardships.
Yeah.
Because you get to either you stand the test of time and you stay consistent on who you are and who your character is and what values you hold, or you can watch someone react righteously in a way that has a lot of honor and dignity when they had all the justification in the world to maybe have reacted a little bit more poorly or emotionally. But when you watch how they can walk through a fire and take the burden on, I think a lot of trust can be gained in those times of turmoil, and who shows up for you and who doesn't, who are your allies, and your comrades, and then who is just in your vicinity. Because usually most people are just in your vicinity, especially when it comes to the coworker relationship, because most of the time we don't get to choose those people that we're put into those workplaces with, but we still have to work very intimately with them. We spend more time with them than we do our own family, as far as like waking hours of the day and stuff. And so I think, learning how to navigate those different personalities and showing up in a way that is fruitful will pay dividends in the long run when it comes to career advancements and things like that. Because you may think that this is a big world, but let me tell you, it is a small place to live, and everybody, the 7 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
And you burn a bridge, and 30 years later, you're going to be up for an opportunity, and someone's going to ask around about your reputation and be like, no, I saw them cheat on this, or I saw them not handle stress well in this circumstance, or something, and it'll hold you back. And you'll never know the reason why. No one's ever going to come back to you and go, well, I was having drinks with, my best friend the other day, and come to find out, my dog center's best friend's uncle knew you when you did this. And it's
long time
you'll never
ago.
get that information. You'll never kind of know. So I think always trying to leave people better off than you found them is a good practice, even if it isn't always as self-serving as you would like it to be.
I think I go back to that, treat people the way you want to be treated.
Right.
And you'll find the extra grace when that happens, because none of us are perfect.
Right.
I mean, when I say pick up the perfect, so I would say that the things that got people in the most trouble would be the lying, cheating, stealing, right? Those worlds. Everything else could be overcome if you just make a simple mistake. We'll figure it out. And it kind of takes us full circle back to the kinds of questions you should be asking in an interview, or when you're setting up your team. Don't get a bunch of mini-me's. Find some folks that have some strengths where you have a blind spot or a weakness. Fill that in, and then trust them to do that. And when you see your influence starting to dry up, start making some choices to go do something new. And it's probably not you. It's just, it's time to move on and do something different. Sometimes it's us getting annoyed because we've been doing the same thing for too long. And that was probably, you asked about the retirement deal. For about a year, I had been looking at new opportunities, but nothing was appealing within the organization. From a promotion perspective, it was time for me to go do something new, and nothing was appealing. And so I kind of decided it's time to do my own thing and get out of the way and let somebody else have those opportunities. Is kind of what drove me to finally do something different. So if nothing's looking appealing, then go and find, you had asked me earlier on some other questions. I would say find those tasks or those things that you do that make you lose track of time. Because that's what you ought to be doing for a living. Find that passion, find the things that, man, you look up and go, holy moly, how is it already 6 p.m.? I just started this at 2 o'clock. How is it? And you totally lose track of time. If you can do that, then you're going to get paid and enjoy what you're doing at the same time, which is amazing.
Absolutely.
That's the best.
I love that you've had just such an interesting career and insights. And I love the tenure that you have. I think you've had the longest tenure of any guest that I've had on the show, honestly, now that I think about it. What is something that you would tell your 18-year-old self to save yourself from some grief in the workplace?
Keep taking risks.
Yes.
Is one thing. Keep learning. Don't let it get stale. I mean, all of us, that doesn't necessarily mean go back to school, but keep learning. My eyes just went really crazy. I think I just talked about find that thing that makes you lose time. And then own your choices. That's a slightly different look than just get rid of the coulda, woulda, shouldas and the if onlys. You made the choice, own it. Okay, yep, I did that. All right, well, it may not be the most popular thing. It's going to be a little painful if somebody comes at me with that one, but you're right, I chose it. So I'm gonna walk it out and make the next choice a little bit better. So those are the things that I would say. If you, I love that. Yeah, own your choices is a little different than saying learn accountability. I really want it to be a different kind of, I made that choice. You had a choice. Even doing nothing is a choice.
Yes, it is.
And be okay with, at the time, that was the right choice for me. So I'm going to be okay with that and move on.
Yeah.
It made me who I am.
Best you could with what you knew.
Yeah. Well, if I made a different choice, maybe I wouldn't have my kids. Maybe I wouldn't have. So all of the things work together.
They do.
For our good, I would say. So that's the wisdom I came up with on the 18-year-old self. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Connie, for joining me today. If you want to pick up Connie's book, we are going to have it linked in the comments below. It's a fun, quick read with lots of just wise wisdom that you can take throughout your career.
Well, thank you so much.
If you don't want to read, she also has an audiobook form, and you can hear her face through the audiobook. I think she did an absolutely amazing job on her recording. So thank you so much, Connie, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. What a blast. I had a great time.
Thanks. Bye, everybody. Thanks again for spending time with us today. If you want more HR stories and resources, go to simplythebest.com to join our newsletter. That's SIPLEY. Until next time, stay happy.